All right, so I'm back with an update on two Lucianno fragrances that I kind of gave sort of like first impressions on not too long ago. One being Luciano's Magnitude and the other being Luciano's Coastal Breeze. Now, what I'm going to do going forward here, especially with inspired fragrances of a particular house, I'm not going to name what that house is, but obviously you can see what that house is just by the way that these bottles look. I'm not really going to mention their name, and I'm also not going to mention the names of the original fragrances in these videos anymore, just due to some of the things that this house is doing to other sort of fragrance creators videos in terms of like copyright strikes and stuff like that. So obviously, if you're pretty familiar with these two fragrances, or if you are sort of in the fragrance community, you obviously which fragrances these are actually trying to clone pretty much. All right, so we'll just kind of leave it at that. Now these are two really good choices, I would say, especially for the price that these go for. I know at the time of buying these two fragrances, one of these were, more than the other. I can't remember which one. But basically the price range was like around, I believe, $35 to like $45, for each of these pretty much. So that is a pretty good deal, I would say, especially for a 100 ml bottle on both of these. And also the sprayer is also like pressurized pretty much on both of these. So really, really good deal on these for sure. And what I'll say is these two fragrances, they're not going to be, I would say, the closest to the original fragrance that I've smelled. But they are definitely solid choices. Now, I'm going to start off with Magnitude. This one, Magnitude, if I'm going to give this one like a sort of overall rating on like a scale from 1 to 100, this one is going to be, in my opinion, at least about 85% close to the original. There are definitely some differences, I would say, from pretty much start to finish. At least in the immediate opening, and I mentioned this before in the previous video, in the immediate opening, this is definitely, in my opinion, going to be a lot harsher than most of the other sort of inspirations of the original fragrance that I've smelled for this. So for instance, it's not going to be nearly as smooth as what Lymphonet is from Fragrance World. It's also not going to be as smooth as something like Lamencity from Alexandria Fragrances. I'm trying to think of the other, inspired fragrance of this fragrance that I've smelled. I know the other one was Flavia's L'Impression, and then also you have the John Lowe Immortal. I want to say that all of those, even the Flavia one, is still going to be smoother than what this one is in the opening. At least for probably like the first 30 seconds or so, this one definitely has a pretty heavy alcohol blast. All right. Now after that, it does settle down and become, I would say as smooth for the most part as the other fragrances, but definitely for that first sort of 30 seconds or so, this is not going to be a fragrance that you'll just want to kind of go straight in and smell. Now, also in comparison with the original fragrance, I'm going to say that the Magnitude, at least from what I can remember in here, let me go ahead and actually spray these two on side by side. At least from what I can remember, the two fragrances, like the Magnitude compared to the original, seem to be a lot more sort of citrus heavy and didn't really have as much sort of herbalness to it that the original did. So yeah, I feel like with the magnitude, I'm getting more of sort of like a kind of like a lemon and bergamot from the magnitude. Whereas with the original, I'm getting more of, I'm getting like, a balanced sort of version pretty much. So I'm getting the citruses, I'm getting the sort of herbal aspect of the fragrance, the spiciness. And it's just a really smooth, well blended, sort of watery sort of feel. Magnitude also does have a sort of watery feel to it as well, in my opinion, but it also, I feel like, comes off a little bit more sort of muskier as well. Yeah, I definitely feel like Magnitude has a little bit more musk than what the original has, pretty much. And the muskiness, in my opinion, is something that kind of carries throughout the whole entire fragrance. This is just overall, it's I guess you could say a muskier fragrance than what the original is. It's definitely a lot heavier on that, sort of aspect of the fragrance. And definitely the herbs, I think, are toned down a little bit more in the Magnitude, and they don't come off as sweet. So that's with the original fragrance. I feel like that's what I was sort of referring to, when I mentioned kind of like this underlying sort of sweetness in previous videos. With the original, it's pretty much just the herbs that I'm smelling in this. And they definitely come off a little bit more sweeter and, slightly more higher quality smelling and stronger in the original fragrance than what they do in Magnitude. Now, one area that I'll say that Magnitude definitely, it has an edge over something like Lymphinate is the actual performance. So in terms of like the projection for Magnitude is definitely going to give you better, projection than what Lymphinate does from Fragrance World. The Fragrance World Lymphinate is very, very accurate. In my opinion, this is definitely going to be the most accurate sort of Middle Eastern, inspiration that you can get. However, Magnitude, in my opinion, so far anyway, other than the like original John Lowe Immortal from Maison Alhambra, I would say that this one is probably slightly below that one in terms of, how well it projects. And then this is definitely going to be, I would say, pretty much on like the bottom tier when it comes to the actual projection. But again, this is, I would say, one of the most accurate, sort of interpretations, pretty much. So yeah, the projection on this is going to be very good. And then also the longevity on this is going to be, I would say, about the same as most of the sort of, inspired fragrances of the original. So this one is going to give you at least about, I would say, 7 to 8 hours pretty much of longevity, which I think, for this particular scent profile is definitely acceptable. So the performance on this is definitely pretty good, especially for the price that you pay for this. So I definitely do enjoy this fragrance, but, again, if we're talking about, just sort of overall sort of, closeness to the original fragrance, Lymphinate is definitely going to be better. All right. So again, like I mentioned, this one is going to be about 85% close pretty much to the original. And then if I'm just going to give this one like an overall rating pretty much on a scale from 1 to 10, I would give this one about a 7.5 out of 10. It's not a bad, interpretation at all. It is a, pretty high quality interpretation. But it definitely, in my opinion, with the sort of added muskiness that it has, it's just not necessarily my favorite interpretation, to the original pretty much. All right. So that's going to be my take pretty much on Magnitude, my final thoughts. And then to come over here to Coastal Breeze. Coastal Breeze is also another pretty solid interpretation to the original fragrance. This, in my opinion, it does also have some, slight sort of differences from start to finish pretty much. In my opinion, this one, it comes off as being a little bit more sort of tart in the opening than what the original fragrance is. And it also doesn't have, I would say, as much sort of black currant, which, again, also sort of adds to that sort of slightly more tart feel that this one has. This one, I feel like the Coastal Breeze has a slightly more heavier emphasis on like lemon, which, I mean, it's not like, it doesn't smell like lemon cleaner or anything like that. It just has a slightly, heavier emphasis on that note, because that note is also in the original fragrance. Also, mint is like I would say a heavy player in the original sort of scent profile. And I feel like the mint in Coastal Breeze is definitely toned down a little bit more than what it is in the original fragrance. All right. So overall rating pretty much, in terms of like the actual closeness on a scale from 1 to 100, I would say that Coastal Breeze is also at like about a 85%, pretty much close to the original fragrance. Which, again, for the price point that you can get this at, this is a 100 ml bottle, pressurized sprayer, really nice presentation. I do think that, this is still a pretty solid choice. However, it's just not going to be as good as something like Pacific Coast from Alexandria Fragrances. Now, Pacific Coast, in my opinion, even, when smelling this side by side with the original fragrance, this one still has some things missing, in my opinion, and it's also not as strong as the original. Just kind of doing my testing of the original fragrance, between these, and then also I know I got the one from Central Obsessions as well. What I can definitely say is I have started to really like the original fragrance, so much to the fact that I'm thinking about either getting a full bottle of the original fragrance, or maybe getting like a decant, bottle or something like that from someone off of Facebook. The original is really, really good. I can definitely say that for sure. I really, really love, that sort of mixture of like those citruses up top, mixed with the mint and the black currant, the apricot. I really, really love those aspects of the fragrance, and just in the air, it smells really, really nice. It really does. So this is, again, also very good, but to me, this one, it doesn't project and push as much as what the original does. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that like the mint in this one is definitely toned down a lot. And then also it doesn't come off as sort of sweet, again, because it has a slightly heavier emphasis on the lemon and a lower emphasis, I would say, on that really sweet, juicy, sort of black currant note that you get in the original fragrance. Again, this one is still going to be good, just not really the best one, I would say, that, you could get out there, but still a pretty high quality one. This one, when you first spray it on, unlike the Magnitude, this one is pretty smooth just straight from the jump. So you don't really have to wait for this one to kind of settle down. You can go right in and smell this one. And this does smell pretty high quality. So definitely kudos to Coastal Breeze for that. And if I'm going to kind of go over the performance on this one, the performance, in my opinion, is, I would say, pretty much average. So with the performance, I'm getting about like 6 hours, pretty much 6 to 6.5 hours of total longevity with the Coastal Breeze. With this being a really, really fresh sort of scent, I think that is okay. It's not as good as what I get with the original fragrance. I also do get slightly better with the Pacific Coast from Alexandria fragrances. But I mean, again, this one being at a much lower price point, I feel like 6 to 6.5 hours is definitely pretty acceptable. All right. So again, about 6 to 6.5 hours of total longevity. And then in terms of the the projection I would say is about average to below average for the most part. This isn't really, it's definitely not as loud as what the original fragrance is. And I would say it's even slightly less louder than what Pacific Coast is. Pacific Coast is also not as loud as what the original fragrance is, but it is still, in my opinion, slightly stronger than what the Lucianno is. All right. So if I'm going to give this one an overall rating on a scale from 1 to 10, I would actually give this one a solid 8 out of 10, pretty much. This one, again, it's not going to be the absolute best that I feel like that you can get. I do actually have another one coming from F.A. Paris Fragrance World called Penis. Just ordered that one, so I'm waiting for that one to come. I have a feeling that one probably will be the best one, because F.A. Paris Fragrance World, they're like top notch, I would say, pretty much when it comes to like the Middle Eastern inspiration houses. So definitely looking forward to that one. But I would say, if you can't find Penis, or if that one is out of your price range or something like that, then this one would definitely be, I would say, your next best choice, pretty much. All right. Because the Pacific Coast from Alexandria for 100 ml bottle is going to be significantly more than, what you would pay for this. All right. So that's my thoughts on the Lucianno Coastal Breeze, as well as Lucianno's Magnitude. Definitely let me know in the comments what you all think about both of these fragrances. Have you smelled these two? And if so, have you also smelled the original? And how close do you actually think that these come to the original fragrances? All right. So let me know in the comments below. Also, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And also, once again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see y'all in the next video.